We successfully implemented our debounce function, but you might also get a question how to implement throttle function. And actually they are super similar, and this is why I have the code from our debounce function, because we really need to change like 1% of the code. So the idea of throttle function is that it will be executed immediately. And just to remind you, debounce function will be executed only after our timeout. Here throttle function executes it immediately, but after that the calling of the function is completely ignored for our timeout, which actually means if user is typing something, we can call our function only at the beginning and then every timeout, so every 2 seconds for example. And this is exactly the core purpose of throttle. And to simulate it, we must change our code a little bit. So here we have our save input, this is fine. Here is process change, but we don't want to use here debounce, we want to write it with throttle. So the arguments are exactly the same. And now here we call process change at the beginning, this is totally fine, but now I want to simulate that we are calling it with set timeout. So here we are writing set timeout, and we want to call this function, process change inside it, after some time, for example after 1 second, then I will copy paste this set timeout and run it after 1 second and 200 milliseconds. Now I copy paste it again, and I will call this function again after 2 seconds and 400 milliseconds. And then I will remove to last process change. So actually, as you can see here, we put timeout 200 milliseconds, which actually means this function must be executed immediately, this set timeout will be ignored, this will be also ignored, and only the last set timeout will call this function because it will happen after this timeout of 200 milliseconds. Now, first of all, let's change the name of our debounce to throttle. We're getting here the same arguments, a function and our timeout. But now here we need not a timer ID, but a boolean, and this boolean will show us if we can execute this function again. This is why not let timer, but let, for example, is waiting, and by default it is false. And now here we also return a function, we don't need here clear timeout, and actually set timeout is staying here, but we don't need timer, because actually we will forbid this set timeout with an if condition. So here we can write if not is waiting, then we want to call this set timeout. In other case we won't call anything, and this code will be just ignored. Also, it is important that we call this function directly. This is why I want to move it inside our if condition, and inside set timeout we simply change our isWaiting property to false back. So as you can see, this line means that at the beginning on the first call we will call this function, but after this we want to set our flag to true. This is why here we are writing isWaiting equals true. Then we have a set timeout, for example 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds we are setting isWaiting to false, which actually means we can call this function only after 2 seconds and not before. So as you can see, the code is 99% the same. The main idea is that we are building here isWaiting flag, and we just allow to access this function once in our timeout. Now let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page, we are getting directly save input foo first time, and then we see only one save input foo second time. And this is exactly this call process change and this last set timeout with 2 seconds and 400 milliseconds. Because actually here on our first try we are going to throttle, isWaiting is false, we are going here, we are checking okay, it is not true, then we are calling directly this function and we are setting our flag to true. And then after our set timeout and the end, we are changing isWaiting back to false. And we don't need here any timer ID because we never abort our set timeout. And the next question that you might get, okay, but what is the difference between debounce and throttle? And as I already said, we're calling debounce after users stop to do something. And we're calling throttle first of all at the beginning and then after a certain interval of time.